Hey everybody, welcome to Buratech. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the top tips for you to get a better job in a recession or get your first job. Alright, welcome back. Before this video, make sure that you like and subscribe for all the latest tips to how to thrive in a recession. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Alright, so this video, I'm going to be talking about the top tips for you to either A, get a better job in a recession, or B, get your first job here. Now, this particular video is for someone who is just starting their career or someone who has maybe a couple jobs here. So kind of people under 30, or let's say people that are just kind of starting their career, maybe just out of college, or you have a job or two. If you're older, that's a completely separate video, and I'm going to be talking about that in a different video here. But for the most part, this kind of information will help mostly everybody, but it's geared toward that demographic. So if you want to get a job, the less picky you are, the more happy and the more jobs you will get here. Now, lots of people don't remember what it's like to search for a job in a recession because the last recession was what, 10, 12, 14 years ago. So lots of people were probably not in the job market, but if you were, it was an absolutely terrible time. Myself personally, I applied to over 400 jobs and got basically zero of them until I started my own business, and then I got a ton of jobs here. So I'm giving a lot of information that will help you try to get your first job or get a better job. So the first thing you need to do is to find the industries that are hiring here. Now, if the industries are in a different field of study than what you just studied, don't worry about that, because the one thing that you need to do is you need to learn new skills quickly. The faster you can learn a skill where you can get hireable, the more profitable your career will be. And there are lots of skills to be had. Now here's the thing though, some skills do require education and others do not. So things that are in the business realm are a lot easier to get a job in than things that are more highly regulated, things like medicine, etc. Of course, if you want to be a doctor, you can't just kind of fall into that profession. You have to go to school, etc. But if, let's say, you have a medical degree and you can't really find a job here, well, there are other things you can do, and there are lots of examples of this happening here. The thing is that when you talk about your career, you want to be moving forward. Now, sometimes you might have to take 3 steps forward and 1 or 2 steps back, but the point is you're moving forward. So the one thing I highly recommend is that when you apply to a job, you have different resumes that tailor to different industries. Let's say if you want to go into industry A, you have a resume, and industry B, you have a different resume. You can't use the same resume for both. And I know that sounds super annoying to have multiple resumes, but that is another tip. You want to have multiple resumes so that you can have a better chance of getting into a specific job here. The next tip I have for you is to be in the shoes of the recruiter. Now, if you've ever tried to recruit anyone or hire anyone, you'll know that you'll get a ton of resumes here. And in fact, during the last recession, when I started my business, I used to get maybe 1 or 2 resumes a day, and some of those resumes were from people that were an MBA. So even though I was a person in my bedroom making 6 figures, working from home, I got resumes that were from people that from very prestigious schools, and they had things like an MBA. And so I thought this was rather interesting, but I actually got, again, 2 to 3 resumes per day. So if you've ever been a recruiter, or you've ever run a business, or you've ever tried to hire anyone, you'll know that you'll get a ton of resumes here. And the thing about that is that you have to make your resume pop out over, let's say, 100 different other applicants. So how do you do that? Well, one of the ways that you can do that is to make sure that you have a simple Word doc resume and you have a nice polished PDF resume. So I know it sounds like a lot of your time is going to be put into your resume, and that is essentially what is going to have to happen. You're going to have to spend quite a bit of time making sure your resume is polished and that there's no spelling mistakes, etc. But going back to that, you want to have a simple Word doc resume, maybe even a text file resume that can be read anywhere, and you want to have a very polished PDF resume that looks really good. And you can do that. You can absolutely have a PDF, and if you're going to have a portfolio, you can have that as well here. You want to basically send them a very well-polished resume in those 2 formats. Now, of course, some businesses will say you can't do that, and other businesses will say that you can. So if there are no requirements attached to what kind of resume you can send, I would highly recommend doing that, because I've looked at a ton of resumes here, and the resumes that have really popped out are the ones that have insanely good graphic design and, well, are much more polished than, let's say, the simple Word doc resume. So having said all that, you want to make sure that your resume pops no matter what format they're sending it to. The next tip I have for you is to constantly acquire new skills here. Now, chances are you might be applying to multiple jobs a day, a week, and a month. You might not hear anything because it can take up to 90 days, even in a good market, for you to get a job here. 90 days, that's 3 months. So what do you do in the interim? Well, you need to constantly do new projects to add to your resume here. And one of the things that you can do is that, let's say you apply to a job and then you get a call back 2 months later, you can send them a new resume and say, hey, look, these are the things that I did in the last 60 days. Because 60 days is a lot of time. 60 days is enough for you to learn a new skill. You can learn Photoshop, you can learn PowerPoint, Excel. You can learn pretty much anything you want in 60 days. And you can always add more things to your portfolio. So there's no reason that learning extra skills is going to diminish your results. The only way that that's going to happen here is that if you're applying to a low-end job here and your skills are way up here, there might be a mismatch here. So you still have to aim high, and I'm going to be talking about that later. But going back to your portfolio, you should always be learning something new, because the thing about a career is that it's more like a wheel rather than a destination. You have to constantly be turning that wheel. You constantly have to be learning things, improving yourself to get a career. If you're just looking for a job, that is just kind of, you get a job and you kind of go to your job and then go home. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but lots of people like careers. Now, in a recession, you need to make sure that you are the best candidate, and the way to do that is to have as many practical projects on your resume. So this is maybe a topic for a completely different video, but I will talk about it right now. Some of the best projects that you can add to your portfolio are graphic design, video editing. You can add in some creative writing. You can add in any kind of coding projects. That's like a website, a video game, or anything that has to do with code, because coding is probably one of the best things you can add to your resume. And the reason for that is that it's so difficult to do. When you think about supply and demand, there are few people that know how to code. Think about all the people you know and think about how many of them know how to code. If you can just learn the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you're way ahead of the game here. And it also shows employers that you're willing to learn, and that you're also willing to learn something new and technical skills will always pay more. The next tip I have for you is to apply to the right job. If you are applying for a low-level position or a high-level position, it will absolutely matter here. If you are applying for a high-level position that requires, let's say, 10+ years of experience in your field and you don't have it, well, then you're probably not going to get that job here. Now, what this means is that you might have to apply to that low-level job, even though you might think that you're a mid-level person. So applying to that low-level job or a mid-level job will be the key to success here. Now, it all depends on the amount of years of experience that you have here. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to get experience even if you don't have a job. But for the most part, there's two ways you can kind of get around this here. So the thing is that if you're right out of university, you want to be applying to all the junior jobs. Just don't even think about getting a mid-level job. It's nothing but junior level jobs, and you're probably going to have to slog it out here. But the thing is that if you get that junior level job, then you can always apply to other junior level jobs. The trick is to get whatever job you get and to be not picky as possible. If the job is terrible, you know what? You can just go apply to another job here. So let's say you get a job today and in 3 months you say, this is not for me. Well, guess what? You can just shop around. And since you were able to get that first job, chances are once you already have a job, it's going to be easier to get another job. So here's the most frustrating thing for any job seeker that has just graduated college here. You can't get a job unless you have experience, and you need a job to get experience. Well, it's this kind of circular logic of death that absolutely frustrates everything. Now, this was frustrating me when I graduated college as well, because I could clearly do the job in a very good way, but I didn't have the experience. So there was a very clear way to kind of cut through that circular logic bullshit. And that way is to intern at your own company. Now, I'm gonna be making a whole separate video about this, but I'm gonna give you the basics here. If you want to do a job, you need to spend your free time doing that job at your own company. And this is where the practical projects really shine. Now, for me, I wanted to be a game programmer, and what I did in my time is that I made video games. And at the time, there was just fewer jobs open, and I applied to jobs and I just pretty much didn't get them until I interned at my own company and I started to get more freelancing work. More about that in a second here. But whatever it is you want to do, you need to find a way to do that job and get experience in your spare time doing it by yourself here. So if you're the kind of person who can self-start and get things done in your spare time. And by the way, when you talk to an employer here, you can say, well, look, in my spare time, I am doing all these things related to my career. I could be doing anything. I could be playing video games. I could be hanging out with my friends at a bar. I could be doing anything, but I decide to work on my career. And you want that kind of person on your team. Now, for bigger businesses, this is not really gonna work. And when you get that experience, you will be in a far better place here. So the best way to get this experience is to do it yourself and intern at your own company and to constantly grind. So the next thing is freelancing. If you can freelance, then that's a really good thing. Now, the freelancing landscape is a lot more competitive and it's a lot more fleshed out than it used to be, but you can find freelancing jobs everywhere. And the thing is that, again, it could take up to 90 or even 120 days to get a job, so you want to have some freelancing projects on the go. Now, the thing about freelancing is that you don't want to do work for free. That's why you intern at your own company. All the free work that you do is at your own company that you intern at, and you do not want to do work for free. You might want to do a couple projects where you lose a bit of time, but you don't want to do work for free. Now, what's frustrating about this is you're going to be losing a lot of work to people who do it for free just for the experience here, but it's so much better to intern at your own company. It's way better to intern at your own company than to get a job freelancing for free. So the next thing that you need to do is you need to constantly network here. Now, the best way to network is to exchange cards and talk a very little about yourself. Your introduction to a person should be, hi, my name is blank, I do this, and then all of the conversation needs to be about the other person here. So once you understand that people like talking more than they like listening, you'll be able to get a lot more connections this way. So the best tip I have for anyone who's networking is that once you exchange kind of who you are and what you do, you can ask them what they do, and you can say something along the lines of, wow, that seems really difficult. What do you do in your spare time? And if you say that, then you will open up a whole bunch more doors than if you just talk about yourself. The one thing you do not want to do when you're networking is just talk about yourself. So if I were to give a very basic kind of outline as to how you would go to these networking events, all you do is you say, hi, my name is blank, I do this, what do you do? And after that, you say, wow, that's really difficult. What do you do in your spare time? So once you do that and exchange business cards and everything, you will have a lot more connections here. And if you really listen, right? If you really listen to what that person's saying, make a note of who they are, and then once you add them on LinkedIn or exchange emails, you make a note and a comment about what they said. So if some person likes to go fishing in their spare time, you can say, hey, Jerry, let's say his name is Jerry. You can say, hey, Jerry, that was a great talking to you. I hope you get to that fishing very soon. Or you can, if you are a person who fishes, you can make a joke or something like that. That will get you a lot more doors here. Now, the thing about a career is that it's not going to be instant. A lot of people think that, a career or a job is like going into a McDonald's. You go into McDonald's, you order, you eat, you get out the door. It's not like that. A career is a long haul. You have to be in it for the long haul. So constantly networking. And here's the thing, if you tell that person, let's say Jerry, that you're, let's say, a web developer, and well, who knows, maybe Jerry remembers you because you actually paid interest to him, and he might have a job for you. A lot of jobs are basically like that here. It's one thing that they don't really tell you, that a lot of jobs are just kind of given out to the people that they already know. So if you know a bunch of people and you're constantly building projects and you're great to work with, well then guess what? You're probably going to get a lot of jobs that aren't even posted on job forums here. So if you want to really get a job, you have to network, pay attention to other people, and talk as little about yourself as possible. Be a listener, not a talker. Now, the hardest thing about finding a job in a recession is to be positive here. It will be difficult, and I'm not even going to sugarcoat that. If we are headed for a 2008 kind of recession, then guess what? It's going to be difficult and it's going to be hard to stay positive here, but you have to stay positive. You have to realize that it's going to be difficult to find a job and it's not going to be easy. So you're going to have to do your best to realize it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy to find a job, but guess what? You are interning at your own company. You are working hard while other people are not working hard, and you're going to get that career. It might take a lot longer on your timeline than you expect it to be, but guess what? You are going to prevail and you have to stay positive here. Now, if you're the kind of person that has a lot of negative thoughts, and let's be realistic here, if you applied to, let's say, 50 jobs and got 50 rejection letters, it's very difficult to stay positive. I know this more than anybody else here. All you have to do is not publicly show it. If you are upset, just don't post on social media. Just don't do any of that. Just talk with maybe your friends or your family, or maybe even a counselor, right? That's not necessarily a bad idea either. And there's no stigma of going to a counselor for mental health here. And believe it or not, there will be a lot of counselors dealing with this issue. So it might be the best thing for you to do. And when you go into these networking situations, you have to think of yourself as a person who is extremely hireable and already has a job. If you're in the mindset that you're already having a job, and by the way, if you're interning at your own company, you technically already have a job, you're just not getting paid for it, right? Just because you have a job doesn't mean you're necessarily getting paid for it. But if you're interning at your own company, you're positive, you're great to work with, you smile, and you network, then guess what? You will be in a far better place than anybody else who's doing the opposite of what I'm telling you. All right, so that concludes this video. I want to know your thoughts down below. Were you in the job market during the last recession? What did you do? Now, I was in the job market, and these are all kind of my tips. And if you really like this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and maybe even share it with a person, because it really does help out this channel. So please be sure to like and subscribe, because I am going to give you a ton of tips to how to beat a recession, especially if you're a first-time job seeker or if you're a small business owner, because I've found a ton of techniques that will help you survive any recession. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.